Welcome back to Simple Truth. We're in the book of 1 Samuel. We're in chapter 17. We're on one of the most familiar stories in all of the Bible. We're on David and Goliath. We're in verse 3, hopefully. We did 2 last week, and we're talking about the setup for this iconic battle between good and evil. And in verse 3, it says the following: "And the Philistines stood on the mountain on one side, Israel stood on the mountain on the other side with a valley between them." Do you know, this is how God allows things to work, right? All the time, it's his army on one side, the enemy on the other side, with a valley in between, right? So there's this concept. There's what the enemy wants to do. There's cancer. There's all kinds of disease and sickness and broken relationships and broken finances and all these things. These are on this side of the mountain. And on the other side of the mountain, right, is the army of God. Right? And we have this idea that on our side, there's these iconic, great, humongous spiritual warriors. They're all standing there. But unfortunately, more often than not, we end up being in this story, right? Because on this side, there's the enemy, loud, boisterous, claiming that we're dead, we're done, we can't overcome evil, we can't fix it, we can't do it. And you know what? His claims are right. You can't do it. There's a valley that's in between, right? And then on this side is us, and we know us. We know all of our faults. We know all of the things, right? And there's this idea, right, that again, we're going to charge up the hill. We're going to charge up the hill, and we're going to take on the enemy. But that rarely ever happens, right? Usually, what happens is that we're caught in this colossal battle that has us on one side of something and the enemy on the other side, and nothing's happening. Let's read the rest of this, and then let me put it into context. It says, "There came out from the camp of the Philistines a champion named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. He had a helmet of bronze on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze, and he had bronze armor on his legs, and a javelin of bronze slung between his shoulders. The shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron, and his shield bearer went before him." Right? So you got this massive, unbelievable enemy that comes out, this giant, right? So there's all the other men, and then there's this giant that steps out, right? And this is what the Israelites see, right? They see the enemy. You know, it's funny because this is so relevant to me, because I hang out with some people, some pretty cool people, most of which you know down here at Trash Ministries and other places, right? And we're all doing the same type of thing. We're all in ministry. You know, we're all trying to help out. Some people have full-time other jobs. Some people are doing, you know, this whole video making part-time, right? But we're all trying to teach. We're all trying to do ministry in different ways, shapes, and forms. But you know that for each one of us, we're in this vast enemy, right? This vast army of the enemy that's on this hillside. But each one of us could pick out the giant in our own life, right? The thing that gets us. For some people, it's fear. For some people, it's pride. For some people, it's the whole idea of resources and idols. For some people, it's wanting to people please. For some, there's all of these giants that are sticking up, and we know it. We see it. That's what we see out of this whole army. Some of us not worried at all about finances. Some of us, finances get us. Some of us are not at all worried about what people think about us, and some of us are worried about what people think about us, right? Some of us struggle a whole bunch with pride. We know what we've accomplished, and we're proud of what we've accomplished, and that gets in the way. Some of us have idols, family and friends and jobs and material stuff, and it just gets in. But we can look across the valley, we can look at the vast army that's over there, and we'll pick out, and the enemy knows exactly what will drive fear into us, right? This is a whole landscape. Listen, for 400 years, God had helped vanquish, right, the promised land. Time and time again, the people went on this whole roller coaster ride. They would do what was right, and God would vanquish the enemy, and then they would do what was wrong, and the enemy would come in. And these are people that had seen God do things. They'd seen God and heard of God doing incredible things with the army of the enemy. Like, hey, we can wipe these guys out. But the enemy knows He's going to give you that thing that you fear, and it's going to stand out above all other things, and you just can't keep your eyes off of it. You can't keep your mind off of it, right? And it starts to build fear within you, right? The enemy knows exactly what he's doing, right? And he will send the things that will get you, the things that will get you insecure, right? And that's the battle. That's the setup of this whole humongous battle. So as you look at your life today, I would challenge you to think this way. Think about the battle that has been set up before you, right? You're on one side, there's the enemy on the other side, and there's this valley in between. And God is looking to empower you to cross the valley and fight the enemy, not to cower from the enemy, not to look at the enemy and run the other way, not to try to coexist with the enemy, not to do all of these things. He wants people who are going to cross the valley and are going to take on the enemy. Jesus sent out his disciples 2 by 2 and told them, hey, listen, preach the good news, right? Cast out demons, heal people, right? Take on the enemy. Now listen, we know, again, I know that Paul said flee from the enemy, resist the enemy, right? And all of those things. Understand that you got to take that within the whole context of what Paul is talking about. And Paul took on the enemy everywhere he went, right? We team up with God. God is constantly trying to fight battles like this. God is constantly trying to vanquish the giants in your world and in my world. And he wants to help you do it. But notice the detail that they go into here about this giant. This is an impressive giant. Do you know that God knows that the battles that you're fighting, that they're impressive in nature? God's not up in heaven going, oh, that's nothing. You know, that's nothing. He knows that the battles you're facing are big and they're huge and they're important to you. He knows it. He's just promised that he's not going to give you something that you cannot overcome. What kind of loving God would do that? Right? So take a look at your landscape. What are you facing? What's the enemy on the opposite side? Understand that your enemy looks different probably than the person sitting next to you. What we fear can look different in nature. Don't poo-poo other people's fears. Don't poo-poo other people's giants, no matter what they are. Just because you have certain aspects of your life under control doesn't mean that other people are struggling with those areas, right? Like that's not a big giant in their life. Right? Know the battlefield. Know the battlefield. Know what you're facing. Know the enemy and how he works. Hey, we'll leave it right there. Simple truth. We'll see you next time.